Call this morning's meeting to order. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and I think we've got some additions to that.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the addition.
Second.
What are the additions?
Well, I don't know whether it's the watershed, not the watershed, or the water thing. Is that an addition? Is that-
No, Mr. Chair, I was just going to provide an update at.
Okay, very good.
My apologies, then I will make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
We'll just do the agenda. then.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And with that, we'll move on to citizens to be heard. I think we've got some scheduled or,
Mr. Chair, I did receive four requests today. One, to present before the board some testimony in regards to the potential closing of the YES program. And then I also received three written testimonies that would read into the record with the board's approval. And looking out into our audience here, I do not see the person who was planning to present, but maybe if I read through the other three at that point, that person will be here.
okay.
All right, Mr. Chair, you each have packets in front of you that includes the email submittal form, but I will read that as we've stated we would do through this process. And so the first person who has submitted a record for the board is Karen Anderson. She lives in West Fargo, but was a former YES staff person. And so she has requested this. I'm a former art education instructor at the YES program. We have a jewel in our midst, a program that for 30 plus years has graduated students who would go on to successfully onto successfully places in society. The program serves students that, for reasons outside of their control, need different methods of receiving high school credit. The model at YES is unique. The YES model allows students to receive credit by a combination of required in-person attendance and outside independent study. YES also provides dual credits for students attending other high schools full-time to accelerate or recoup credits. The magic of YES exists in the model of delivery and in the high teachers to student ratio. For example, the student responsibility for younger siblings that need to get them ready for their school day, as well as working a part-time job, and create the flexible schedule needed to secure their high school diploma. YES steps into shape qualified enhanced learning to students that have lives that regular high schools cannot address. YES was responsible for maintaining its own budget and worked out of their own building in the industrial section of Moorhead. When the building's roof collapsed several years ago, Lakes Country Co-op Service entered into a partnership with MSUM to inhabit several classrooms. LRSC chose 2 classrooms and renovated them to fit the 7 curriculum areas and a small multi-use conference lunchroom and an administrative office. As we had full classrooms at the former building, we requested a 3rd classroom to be renovated. This did not happen. So as what came first, the chicken or the egg scenario developed. The budget was taken from YES staff control as well. YES receives dollars for operations from our attendance from the school districts that send students to it. The small classroom space began the dwindling of income to support the school. LCSC refused to expand to the 3rd classrooms as teachers were not being paid scale because of our flexibility. LCSC felt that was fine not to pay regular scale of surrounding schools. But the heart of YES are the teachers that had very little turnover throughout the 30 plus years of its existence. Money is not a motivator, but fairness was not in LCSC's toolkit. A quick rundown of our flexibility. We can put together cross-curriculum units for any subject easily. When we take students off a yearly trek to Yellowstone, they fundraise themselves to partake in. All curriculum areas provide class material speaking to the ecosystem's history, math, science, facts, art, English, and of course science. I am proud of the success of the students from the YES program. If the YES model can be saved, it will be a model that should be advertised, celebrated, replicated across the nation. LCSC does not believe that. Hopefully for the students that are struggling at home and not attending school for reasons out of their control, some solution can be found.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just have a question. Does this Clay County Board have any, I don't ever recall us talking about the funding of the YES program.
I think Commissioner Campbell is part of a committee through Lakes Country, and that's been mentioned a couple of times.
Okay. But based on that testimony, is that true that we don't fund the YES program?
Clay County is not responsible to fund it.
Clay County never has funded
Okay,
the YES program.
thank you.
The second person is from Tricia Eisendorf from Moorhead. She asked to please join forces with us, our 17-year-old son with disabilities and challenges, and many others trying to obtain a high school diploma, and need our advocacy for a continued opportunity. On March 2nd, we received a devastating email, a local school program, YES, designed to help high school students through the educational journey towards a diploma, is facing an abrupt closure that apparently has come down to funding. The lack of funding does not make sense. Multiple agencies have reported an enormous surplus of $17.6 billion in Minnesota. We need to be allies to help us initiate a conversation and ask some hard questions in regards to the valuable school program coming to an end. According to the email, disassembling the YES program is being solidified at a meeting on March 9th, a one-week notice. Therefore, addressing this news is urgent matter, as the need to stop the June closure is important. It is detrimental that our son adequately receives services outlined in his IEP with the intent to guide him through graduation. Our son was on track to finally graduate this year around Thanksgiving. As a last resort, this program should be phased out for those who are already in attendance. Our son, along with several students with background stories as well, need this unconventional setting and individualized curriculum as a means to obtain his high school diploma via the Moorhead High School. Like many of the other attendees, his educational journey has been unbelievable as he has battled barrier after barrier. We have moved to 2 different cities, towns, 3 school districts total, trying to find a fit for his academic needs, and his learning disability is severe, and other unrelenting hurdles have complicated his ability to really flourish in a conventional school setting. Because we were confident in the YES program, the answer opportunity my son needed, we bought a second small home in Moorhead, a different town than our permanent residence, on January 17th, so he would be able to join the YES program. The untraditional program with a state education website address. Like so many others, our son finally found a safe, comfortable environment that can help him navigate towards his goals of graduation, his golden opportunity to earn a high school diploma. My husband and I are both highly educated school teachers, coaches, who see a growing need for alternative education of youth in general. Losing this program would be devastating to many, past, present, and future. We need help in being an advocate voice for those students, bringing upcoming closure to light, and establishing communication with those of influence could be a step in the right direction. Please consider dedicating some time to this issue. Please consider being an ally and attending the open board of directors meeting for the YES services on March 9th at noon in Fergus Falls. Please consider showing support by signing our petition at www.change.org/yes for our youth and joining our Facebook page. Thank you, Eric and Tricia Eisendorf. And then the last document to be read is from Sharon Walker, again, from Lake Park, Minnesota, but a former staff member. I retired a few years ago after spending the last 17 years of my teaching career as the science teacher at the YES program. I heard from literally hundreds of students that they would not have graduated from high school without the caring staff and innovative programming provided by this school. This is a truly great educational program for many students, many struggling teenagers. I was blessed to be able to work every day at a place that makes a difference. It would be a terrible loss to the community to lose this educational option. I can take a peek in the hallway, Mr. Chair, but I don't see Mr. Eisendorf. Eisendorf?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
maybe if I could make a few comments on this.
Go for it.
So certainly, these letters of support have a lot of good information in them, and it's accurate information in terms of the program that YES has been over the last 30 years. I think it was the Clay County Schools that actually had gone to Lakes Country with requesting to assistance with this alternative learning program. Since my involvement on the board here the last few years, I think as I came on is when the YES program was starting to run annually, an annual deficit. And so there's been constant discussion over the last few years about, at first it was kind of monitoring it to see how it would go with hopes that it could turn around. There became an awful lot of additional concerns in addition to just the funding itself. It was the concern about teacher shortages that often happen, other additional needs, and then we had to give you an idea. That board is made up of about a dozen folks, and there's two of us who are county commissioners that represent the entire district, and there's one that represents the cities, and that person is from Fergus Falls, and all the rest of them are school board members or school board superintendents who serve on this Lakes Country Service Cooperative Board. The vast majority, I think, that Lakes Country is known for in all these communities is their work with providing the health insurance. That's a big thing for them, but they do an awful lot of other things. The YES program is one little component of what all Lakes Country does. And you know, Lakes Country does not receive any tax dollars for education. That money goes to the school districts. You know, and then, you know, in looking at that and talking with superintendents and in comparing to when this program first started, there's several new things that are happening now. There's ability for online learning. You know, and I don't want to take away from these individual parents and their individual students who have the special needs and need the alternative education. That I'm not arguing against that, but I'm just saying that there's so many other opportunities. And I had a chance to speak when I first learned that the board was considering this. I went right to Brandon Lunick, the superintendent of Moorhead Public Schools, and I asked him. I said, "Well, you know, what would?" At that point, I was kind of seeing if Moorhead would be willing to, the school districts, not just Moorhead but other school districts, would be interested in helping fund the additional shortages that we're seeing on an annual basis. And kind of the response that we got is that there are other options for us now. We have other places that we can deal with these students that we didn't have years ago. I'll give you another prime example of just what recently happened is the Career Academy in Moorhead. It's a perfect example of an alternative form of education, you know, for these students. I just received an email from Jeremy Kovash, the director of Lakes Country, yesterday, and he was just notified by the superintendent of DGF that starting next fall, they plan on instituting their own alternative learning program in the DGF school system. So there's an awful lot of efforts being made to still provide the necessary needs of these students. I know right now it's not comforting to them. I also got an email from Director Kovash that stated that I know in one of the comments you read, Mr. Larson, you said that, well, if in worst case scenario, if they could phase it out, you know, I think the goal, if this is to happen, would be that they would try to see as many as these kids that are currently in the system get graduated. You know, there's some, especially those that are, I think I read one comment someplace where one was just in their final year. So I think they would work with that with the hopes that maybe those could maybe see that graduation occur prior to the closure. That's certainly going to be efforts made if this were to happen. But there's an awful lot of discussion that's gone into this. And the teachers have been commended, and I commend them too. A lot of them have been there a long time, some of them are tenured, and they don't make as much money as other teachers working for that program. So it's even a more of an important deal to them. And we also learned in our discussions is that, because we were concerned about if you close something, what happens to your staff? Where do they go? And from what we gathered from the school board members and superintendents that are part of Lakes Country is that there will be opportunities for them for continued employment. That's kind of where it's at. This board makes no decisions on this whatsoever. I think they're reaching out to as many people as they can for support, which is fine. But I just wanted to give you a little bit more background history on this current situation. Unfortunately, so this meeting is on Thursday, and I serve in that. And unfortunately, I'm flying out of here after this meeting today for the first winter vacation that I can remember in my lifetime. But I will not be there for that meeting. But I don't know if there's any questions that the board has, but.
I think you pretty well explained as far as I'm concerned, and unless you guys got some questions on it, or?
I think no questions, but maybe since Commissioner Campbell will not be able to attend, just forwarding the testimony from the citizens to be heard here to Jeremy Kovash. I think you've got it electronically so that the board can have it.
Yes.
That'd be helpful.
Looks like they've been working on it for some time. I mean, they must be aware that they plan on closing this
Well,
it wasn't just a new thing that came up.
Commissioner Gross, again, like I said, I think I've reported on my committee reports for the last couple of years, maybe 3 years, about the discussions about the YES program and its funding shortfalls and the concerns that the board had with that piece of it. So this has been going on for a while. We've had discussions this fall and this winter, and the direction continues to go in that way where it's just not sustainable. So, but what we did want to do is we wanted our director to have the ability to reach out to the teachers and the families and all those, which happened prior to this meeting that we're having in March.
So where does their funding come from?
Their funding comes back from the school districts of where the students are from.
Okay. So they're still going to be funding because it sounds like they're all coming up with their own ideas of continuing.
Well, I don't know that, I don't want to get into the weeds on how the funding comes down, but every school district receives funds from the state,
Okay.
per pupil. And so those dollars go to the school district, and then these kids that are in this program, there's a process in place, and then Lakes Country bills back at a certain rate to the school districts for that service, but it's never enough to cover the cost of all the teachers and.
Very good. Well, thank you for that update. And
Okay.
you have a comment? No? Okay. Very good. Well, we'll move on then to approval of the payment of bills and vouchers.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Dave to pay the bills.
Second.
Second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Okay. Approval of the minutes from February 21st.
Move for approval of the minutes.
Motion by Dave,
Second.
second by Kevin, to approve the minutes from February 21st. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll go on with our updates today for our departments. We'll start with Matt for planning and zoning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
Morning, Matt.
So I'd start out with a joke, but there's really nothing funny about planning and zoning, so
Hey, HR had a joke, so.
I can't top that.
That should be required.
It's all serious business for me here. All right, well, thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to come present to you about our 2022 year and a little bit more about what kind of we're looking at in the planning and zoning world for 2023. Just to give you a little bit of background, so the mission of our department is really to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare of county citizens, and that is implemented through the administration of appropriate planning, zoning, subdivision regulations, and these regulations are crafted to follow state and federal laws as well as our Clay County Comprehensive Plan. And related to our Clay County Comprehensive Plan, which was updated and adopted in 2022, we do have a county vision statement. And this is basically kind of the guiding vision for development in Clay County. And I'll just read this here. Clay County values its existing rural and agricultural character while ensuring a thoughtful, balanced approach to growth and development in the years to come. Clay County is committed to principles of equity, inclusion, and service by providing quality services and facilities for all citizens and future residents. Clay County recognizes the importance of its agricultural and natural resources while looking for new opportunities to support economic vitality. Clay County will promote sound planning principles that foster economic, environmental, and community resilience to ensure that Clay County thrives into 2045 and beyond. And so one thing too with when looking at this vision statement is, you know, the comprehensive plan focuses a lot on land use development and growth and things like that. We did want to make sure when developing this comprehensive plan, our county vision, to really encapsulate some of the other services that Clay County provides to its citizens and residents, and making sure that that's at the forefront as well. So what our department does, in terms of planning, we administer the comprehensive plan and development code. We do permitting, so building permits, land alteration permits in shoreland areas, and then minor subdivisions. Those are all administrative permits that are approved by staff. We also staff the Board of Adjustment, the Board of Commissioners, and Planning Commission. We do investigations and enforcement of the development code, administration of our floodplain program, and then the shoreland program as well. And so just going to briefly go over the different boards that we serve. So the Board of Adjustment, that is established by statute. It's 5 citizens. They're served 3-year terms. They're appointed by you all. They mainly hear variances. So when landowners have a project or something that they would like to do, but they are not able to do that because of their lot or their situation, primarily related to maybe the dimensional standards, something unique about their lot precludes them from doing that when other similarly situated landowners could do the same thing. The Board of Adjustment also hears any appeals of administrative decisions. So typically, when you think of like a building permit being denied or a subdivision, minor subdivision being denied, the applicant has an avenue to appeal that decision. It's not just a one and done thing. They can go to the Board of Adjustment and appeal that decision if they feel that was not made, that decision was not correct. They can also appeal, say, if there's a potential zoning violation as well, and they're being ordered to remedy or abate that violation. If they don't believe that there's a violation, they can appeal that decision as well to the Board of Adjustment. The Planning Commission is also established by the Board of Commissioners. It's an 11-member commission, so we have a county commissioner, a Moritz council person, someone from Oakport, or an at-large member, Moorhead Township or at-large member, someone from the SWCD, rural Clay County members, and then 3 members from incorporated areas. So a pretty diverse mix that kind of reflects the population makeup of the county.
Matt,
They're
can
also-
Mr. Can I, while we're on this subject?
Yeah,
So, we point out one Oakport Township or one Moorhead Township member or at-large member, and I think the idea there was to have townships involved. And typically those were actually township elected people at the time, weren't they?
yes, I believe so.
So, I just wonder, as we move forward on this, Oakport Township it's not anywhere near in terms of size, population-wise, what it was before, and the same with Moorhead Township, but maybe something to think about going forward, and I think it still is important to have the township supervisors as part of the planning commission, but maybe just to eliminate that it has to be Oakport or Moorhead, and we often hear about issues related versus the eastern half of the county versus the western half of the county. Maybe we could suggest that there be a township supervisor from the west and a township supervisor from the east as part of that whole process, and not necessarily designate that it comes from Oakport or Moorhead Township.
Yeah, and Commissioner Campbell and Mr. Chair, I think that's actually a really good idea and something that's worth looking at. When I've seen this, my impression or thought at the time was just because Moorhead Township and Oakport Township, especially kind of in the mid-2000s, there's a lot of growth happening around Moorhead and Dilworth, and that was probably the reasoning for that. But, it could be we're at the point where maybe having more broad geographic representation from Clay County and townships on the Planning Commission might be a great idea. Because right now, we don't have anyone from Oakport Township or Moorhead Township serving on the plan.
Is that a requirement that they have to be from Moorhead?
Kurt, we have Kurt Shervin, yeah.
Yep, Kurt Shervin.
Sorry.
Is that a requirement they have to be from Oakport and Moorhead? Or are you just stating they are from Oakport and Moorhead?
It is in our bylaws right now, so the Planning Commission could just go through the process of amending the bylaws.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And I think to that, as openings have come up, we've been deliberate to make sure that we're geographically representing Clay County as broad as possible. And so there is a township member from Kurt Shervin is the Oakport area. And then we also have a western or an eastern township representative and Ezra Bear from the township.
Yep, from Goose Prairie Township. And then on our Board of Adjustment too, we've kind of tried to do the same thing. A lot of the variances requests that come are from our southeastern part of Clay County, where there's more shoreland. And so we've always tried to get someone who lives in kind of the lakes area on that board. And then also having a township representation there. I think we have a Ulen Township, and then also Oakport Township rep on the Board of Adjustment.
But I'll just go back. I think we should just, I think it's important that we still designate that those 2 positions would be township supervisor positions. Because if you look further down, we still have 3 rural Clay County members.
Right.
That can just be a citizen who happens to live in the rural area, maybe the southeast part of the Lakes Country or whatever that you're referring to, but
So then do you split it? How do you determine the east versus west? Do you split half the townships north to south and then go, or do you pick 9 or?
You pick, Highway 9 or, that's kind of,
You determine.
yeah.
I guess I brought this up in splitting it only because a lot of times you have a tendency to hear more about east versus west
Yes.
county as opposed to north versus south county issues. So that's why I would maybe look at doing it, maybe 9 or something.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and that's something that we can bring to our next Planning Commission
Yeah,
meeting and have discussions on.
Okay,
good
very good.
suggestion.
Yep.
Thank you.
The Planning Commission provides guidance on comprehensive plan and land use code development. They also are the decision makers on use permits. So 2 types of use permits: conditional use permits, and that's a permit that for a specific type of use that in a zoning district would be allowable, but maybe some additional conditions need to be attached to that, just to minimize land use conflicts, stay in conformance with county, state, federal law as well. Conditional use permits, something that's kind of unique about them is they're a land right, so they are tied to the land. And as long as all the conditions are followed on whatever the use permit is, it runs with the land essentially forever. So ownership can change, and it can keep whatever that use is it's a land right. Interim use permits are a little bit different. They're essentially the same, but they're not necessarily a land right because you can set a time when they expire. It can either be a date or an event. They also make recommendations to the county board on amendments to the development code, rezoning requests, subdivisions, so that would be like major subdivisions, platted subdivisions, and then temporary uses as well. So in Clay County, we do allow for temporary uses that wouldn't be allowed in, it can be a temporary use that might not be allowed in that zoning district, providing that it's truly temporary, and that's defined as no more than 3 months. And then your role, this is essentially from our current county code, so providing enforcement and administration, which you delegate to the Board of Adjustment, Planning Commission, county staff, holding public hearings, hearing appeals to the Planning Commission decision on use permits, holding hearings for text amendments or zoning amendments, as well as major subdivision plats. And yeah, I think we've heard a lot of zoning and text amendments probably in the past few years, and so that's kind of where your role has really come into play in terms of planning and zoning. So some highlights from 2022. So the past couple of years in 2021 and 2022, we've seen actually really starting in 2019, it was a pretty big jump in building permits, and seen like last year I think was a record for building permits. That's dropped a little bit this year, not significantly overall. What is interesting is with new dwellings. So we had 43 permits in 2021. We only had 31 in 2022. A lot of outside factors and market forces kind of probably driving that, I would imagine.
Price.
Yep. Price, yep. Rates and all that fun stuff. So, in terms of valuation, so our total building permit valuation is around 130 million, just about 25 mil, or 23 million, excuse me, this year, with the average value for permits being kind of around that $130,000 mark. So that's dropped a little bit, but that peaked in 2021, and it was also high in 2018 as well. I think the drop there can be attributed to less housing in the past year. How residential projects typically have the highest valuation in terms of construction and development in Clay County. In terms of subdivisions, so in 2021, 2020, we had quite a few minor subdivisions. I think a lot of folks were taking advantage of the very low interest rates and refinancing in those years. And a lot of banks required that, a lot of people might have a farm site that's on the same parcel as, multiple acres of farmland. They went to refinance. Banks said, well, we'd only want to refinance on the home and maximum 10 acres around that. So you saw that was driving a lot of subdivisions. This year, we did not have as many minor subdivisions. We did see some what are called boundary line adjustments, where folks might be just moving their lot lines. They might buy an acre of their neighbor's land and just move their property line a little bit. So we saw some of that. And then also just one plat for this year. So I think that the subdivisions might be moderating a little bit more to more where they're typically seen historically, just with our interest rates rising. In terms of conditional and interim use permit trends, so in 2022, there was 15 conditional use permits and 16 interim use permits that were issued. This does include amendments to previous permits as well. We can tease those out a little bit, but that's, in the past 7 or 8 years, it's been pretty high for Clay County and continues to be. And far and away, if you're looking at kind of what types of uses are being permitted, seeing storage, home occupation, so businesses that are home-based, gravel mines, and then community solar gardens as well, kind of being our top permit issued. We'll say with some of these community solar garden projects, there's been some amendments to those just because there was some issues with the tariffs. There's some solar tariffs, so it made it hard to get materials and supplies from Southeast Asian countries. Those have lifted, and so we're starting to hopefully see some movement on some of those. There's been a couple too that are basically shelved right now as well, in the kind of southwest part of the county, just because of issues with interconnection to the grid, so being cost prohibitive. So, but if you ever driving up and down Highway 9, you'll seeing a lot more community solar up there. And then gravel mine, some new and expanding. I think we probably more in the past year, maybe 2 years ago, we were seeing a lot of permits for new gravel mines. Last year, a lot more amendments on existing mines, either just requesting more acreage. Their permits were expiring, so they needed to extend those. So that there was a lot more of that as well.
Isn't there still a limit of 39 acres for gravel mine?
Yeah, so the 39 acres comes from the Minnesota environmental rules. So for different types of projects, there are different mandatory thresholds for when a environmental assessment worksheet or in an environmental impact statement would be required by the state of Minnesota. For gravel mining, sand and gravel mining, that is a 39, or it's 40 acres, to a mean depth of 10 feet or more. So you could have a 50-acre mine, you could have a 48-acre mine, where if the mean depth of that mine is less than 10 feet, then that would not trigger any mandatory environmental rules. So a little easier to see the area, the footprint of a mining operation. It's a little more difficult to get what the mean depth is without some more sophisticated equipment.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question on that too? So the gravel mines, you have this shaded area there and it shows 48. Is that what was once active?
So that's just what's been permitted in the past 7 years, from 2015 to 2022.
Okay.
And then in the past 2 years.
25 of those.
Yep.
Have occurred.
Just kind of wanted to show
Okay.
the more recently permitted ones versus more little further back.
So even the 48 number is still active, it's just that when.
Yeah, yep. So right now, I think we have close to maybe just over 60 active travel mines in Clay County
Okay.
that are permitted, and then there's a number of ones that are grandfathered in. I mean, gravel mining has been in part of this county since, gosh, 20s, 30s, probably longer than that. So, and some of those mines are still active. Variances. So, variances have been pretty steady. 2021, 2022, we've only seen 13. And then 2020, we saw 15, two were withdrawn or denied. 2019 was kind of a bigger year for variance requests. And so these are those types of permits that are issued by the Board of Adjustment. I will just say too, in our start to 2023, we have not had a variance request yet. So either we're going to be hearing a lot of after the fact variance requests at the, within later this year or early next year. That means someone built something and didn't get a permit and maybe built it not in compliance or accordance with the standards. So they have the opportunity to request an after the fact variance from the Board of Adjustment. So that could be a possibility. Or everyone's just getting everything permitting and doing everything right. So I'd like to say it's the latter. I don't think we've included this particular category in our presentations to you all in the past few years. So just looking at zoning violations since 2018, you can see that right now they've gone up, and I think a lot of that is attributed to just being more present in the county. Having the planning technician position has certainly helped, and you can kind of see that in 2019 compared to 2018. 2020, just with it kind of being a COVID year, maybe there was just less violations, less ability to go out and observe or find out about violations. And then in 2021, 2022, we've 102 violations. Right now, carrying into 2023, we've got 54 active violations, vast majority of them pretty minor, some more significant ones that we've been working with the Clay County, with the attorney's office on, and been fantastic to work with. So credit to Attorney Melton and his staff there. Typically, the average, and a big credit to Erica as well, our planning technician. She really does a fantastic job with investigations and enforcements, and this particular part of planning and zoning is not the easiest. It's difficult. It's not fun for anyone really, but it has to be done. And with Erica, she's been able to. I really attribute a lot of this to Erica. Our active time that a violation is open is like 83 days, which is very good. That's if you can get it under 3 months from the point where you identify a violation to where a violation is resolved. If you can get that done in less than 90 days, that's it's almost miraculous. So I really credit her and her work for making that happen.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. Matt, I appreciate that you're giving us the historical data. That's really helpful for us to see trends. And I'll say as well, I think that while there might be an increase in the violations, a lot of the criticism that the county planning gets is that we're adding conditions, but then there's no teeth or no follow through. And so residents are frustrated, and we used to have a lot of people at the planning commission. And I think it's a testament to the fact that we haven't had as many people providing comment on permits that we're hearing, because people know that the county will follow through on the conditions that we're placing. And I also agree. I think that while there may be violations, part of this board's directive to you when you took over the department was that we wanted you and your department more present in working with the folks that have outstanding permits and making sure that everything is followed up on. And I think that helps you as you work through different companies as they come to you. There's a familiarity as they work through the process, and being an out Clay County commissioner, my phone would ring quite frequently from people all over the county and frustrations within the planning and zoning department. And while the violations have gone on or increased, I'm not getting those calls, which means you're effectively dealing with it in a concise and quick manner. So again, thanks to you and Erica and Rita. You have a small but mighty department, so thanks for the work that you do.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Commissioner Mojo. Yeah, I think the kind of the philosophy that we've taken is we just try to work with people as much as possible in getting these issues addressed and violations addressed. And we found that that's a very, very effective approach. I've included this in the past, and so just kind of wanted to give you an update on gravel tax. And so for kind of maybe perplexingly for 2022, our gravel tax revenue has continued to drop. So we, in 2021, we collected just over $400,000. And this year we're at about $385,000 of gravel tax revenues. And that's from just under 2 million reported tons that have been extracted, as well as 407 or about just over 400,000 cubic yards. So companies either will report in total tons or cubic yards. And so that's those are the numbers that we've seen. And there's definitely a couple of pits where you look at the activity at those pits, and then you look at their reported gravel taxes, and you kind of scratch your head just a little bit.
Yeah, that perplexes me. The decrease in 2021 and 2022 does not add up.
No. And I think, this is just important because a lot of our townships, especially townships that have gravel pits and townships that are adjacent to other townships that have gravel pits, they, rely on this revenue to help with road maintenance, especially on those roads that see a lot of truck traffic. And so I will say that there have been, with regards to maintenance, working with townships and with the highway departments, and then with there's some gravel companies that there's a lot more. They have a lot more trucks on the roads, and they've been pretty responsive when we brought up issues, which has been.
Who monitors that, though, as far as the gravel tax? I mean, how many?
So it's self-reported.
It's self-reported, though.
Yep, it's self-reported quarterly.
But we don't monitor it at all. It's just whatever they report.
Yeah, we don't really have a good way of, unless in a. So it kind of falls under the auditor's office. So I don't want to speak for that department, but these companies will report their taxes to the planning and zoning office, and then we will work with the auditor's office as well on that.
Okay.
Yep. And so in terms of really, I think the only thing that could be done would be if there is a need to maybe look into a specific pit a little bit more, that would require the county hiring out for contracting with a consultant to do an audit.
Well, I just want to state that what was reported in 2020 is 1 million less total tons in 2022.
Yeah.
And our county engineer is on the agenda today at some point, or I saw him, on the township maintenance contract. And we have a huge project on a road coming up, 26, that has deteriorated at a substantial rate because of the increased gravel trucks. And I think he could even tell you that that just doesn't add up based on what our traffic counts are. And, you know, I'm not trying to point fingers anyhow. I'm trying to figure out what doesn't add up. If it was, you know, I know there's several very, very large projects. And so if the reporting from the contract, the overhead contract didn't get reported correctly, but there's no way that our gravel pits generated 1 million less tons in 2022 than 2020. It just doesn't add up.
Dave?
Yeah, and without being accusatory, we need to hold people to a level of candor to where they either don't get sloppy with their bookkeeping or don't get evasive. And maybe it's time to look and consider an audit. I mean, that sends a good signal to everybody is they've got to keep their count right and they've got to be responsible about it. And if I mean, just looking at this, I'm not an expert in the area. I think Commissioner Mojo's got some experience with that, dealing with her part of the county. That's something I think maybe we need to consider, is taking a look. It sends a signal that we're going to be serious about collecting the taxes that are due to maintain the roads in the county.
Yeah.
And I will say, just food for people's, for thought, understanding, you know, there's a lot of gravel pits in my district, southeast Clay County, that are very close to the Becker County line. So if, you know, in many of them, there's a Clay County pit on one side and a Becker County pit on the other that are operated by the same company. So if it means that they weren't actively mining out of the Clay County pit and right across the road, you know, that reflects Becker County's tax. So I think you have to holistically look at all of it, but agreed, I think more questions maybe than answers.
Well, those are the kind of answers an audit will give you.
Absolutely, and that's a great point, Commissioner Mojo, because especially with some of the diversion work that's happened, and some of the truck traffic that we've seen on County 2, for instance, down in the south part of the county, a lot of that seems to be originating just across the county line in Becker County, and as the diversion work especially moves north, there are gravel pits that have been permitted with anticipating that movement north. So it will, in the next couple of years, I think next 2 to 4 years, be interesting to see those pits that are maybe north of 26 and see kind of how the activity changes there in terms of material coming out of those pits. There may also could be another explanation, could be there could have been mining that happened in 2022, but a lot of that material could be stockpiled on site,
yeah.
and it might not be actually moving out of the pit. It might not have moved out of the pit that year. So again, an audit would get at that, but also maybe even before that, just being more cognizant and maybe more observant of that and keeping better track of that might be another way to go too.
And I know we're kind of bogged down on this, but I think another component is we have the Clay County Township Association meeting coming up, making sure we're talking with the townships there about what are you seeing, you know, what's reflective here. Are you seeing increased truck traffic? Most of them will likely say yes, but I think making sure we're talking with our townships about what they're seeing is helpful as we move forward.
Absolutely. So that's something I can certainly, if this board would like, can have conversations with the auditor's office and then the highway department too, about kind of maybe getting some better answers on kind of the dip in production. Okay. I would have to say probably one of the major accomplishments by this board and our departments and several others, the Planning Commission, has been the adoption of the 2045 Clay County Comprehensive Plan. So the previous plan was 2002 vintage, so about 20 years old, and that's kind of when a plan gets to be about 20 years old, you should have maybe thought about updating it like 5 or 10 years prior. So really happy and really excited that this work was accomplished, and really just a big thank you to the Planning Commission, to MetroCog, who served as kind of the lead plan writers on this plan, and then our study review committee, and you all as a board as well, for authorizing this and providing oversight. I think it turned out really well and will serve as a good guide for investment in Clay County and for growth and development as well. So I've already had a couple of folks from economic development folks from Barnesville, from Moorhead, from outside of Clay County, calling about projects and referring to specific points in this plan and saying, oh, we can maybe use this in a grant application, or we can use this as a basis for maybe a future development project in Clay County. So, which is very, very good to see. Any questions for me at all? Oh, before we go to questions, I guess for 2023, a couple of things that I'm kind of just want to highlight that would be good to look at, potentially working on. One being an update to our development code. It was last updated in 2012. In statute in Minnesota, when within 3 years of updating a comprehensive plan, it's kind of, you don't have to do this, but it's encouraged to updating ordinances. And the purpose of that is the comprehensive plan provides kind of the vision and goals and objectives of for land use and development in the county. And then your development code or your set of ordinances are kind of one of your main tools for implementing that plan. The other thing is an online permit application. This is something that I was hoping that would have been done last year, having some issues before we can get it out to the public. I think we're really close on that. And if that goes well, right now it's just for building permits. It would be nice to expand that to other land use permits as well, so variances, conditional interim use permits. Just making that process more streamlined and easier for folks to apply for these permits. And then the last thing is that I want to just highlight on is just working on, Eric and I working on remote pilot certifications. And so we found that especially with gravel pits and gravel inspections, we have been using aerial imagery a lot to do investigations, enforcement, things like that. And we're finding that we're catching these things 2 to 5 years after they actually happen, because aerial imagery is only updated every so often. And so having the ability to go out and use a UAV or something like that to quickly do these types of inspections, not only for gravel pits, but for our community solar for platted subdivisions before any houses are built, and then for county-owned property management as well. And Eric and I have been taking the course to get the certifications and I've been finding that there's a lot of relevant crossover between what I've been learning about FAA rules and regulations and the 2 airport zoning boards that I'm serving on as well in Moorhead and Hawley. All right, any questions for me?
I guess you covered it well.
Apologies, I feel like I went a little longer than I
Probably a little,
thought,
you know,
but,
only about an hour, but, no, you did.
well, good thing I didn't include any jokes then.
No, I really want to compliment you on your report. I mean, you, along with all the other departments that have reported this year, you have just done a great job in explaining your departments, and I really appreciate that. Make it lengthy, whatever, but it's really a good update you gave us, Matt, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and I honestly couldn't do it without Rita and Erica and all the work that they put into this too. So I'm up here presenting it, but the work that they do and the contributions that they make cannot be overlooked or overstated as well. So,
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll move on to the department update from our attorney's office, Mr. Melton and his staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Thanks for having us. I actually really enjoy being able to come and do the update, but also doing it after several other departments have done it is always very interesting because I know when I listen to a lot of their departments, we have a lot of involvement with many of those departments, whether it's Sheriff's Department, Social Services, but a lot of the other departments within the county, you know, the auditors, planning and zoning, you know, all those types of things that we get to work with. Help them. There's always a lot of legal issues that go on with that. So I did bring both Pam and Katie here with me today to help talk about their divisions and each of my chiefs for both the criminal division and the civil division. And obviously Pam's been here over 20 years now, so we don't give out kudos bars anymore, but she's been here well worth kudo bar time, you know. And then Katie's now right at about a year with us. As you might recall, we had not had a chief for the civil division for a period of time, but it's worked out very well to have her here. She's doing a great job. So I thought it'd be great to bring them and just talk about some of the things that have been going on within the office and within the county. So obviously our job is to work to promote justice, public safety, effective government, work to prosecute crime. You know, I think something that we pride ourselves in is both some of the specialty courts and working to try to help folks get themselves back online, make sure they're a productive member of the community is important to us, but then it's also important in regard to public safety. Those people that are some of the worst within the community that really what they're there to do is cause problems and cause mayhem and make sure that they're not on the streets and continue to do that so that we have a safe community and a good growing community. And so I know when Pam talks, we'll see some of the bigger sentences we've had over the last year, ensuring that some of those real serious criminals are off the streets and are out of the community. So one of the things I did, I thought we have a lot of new people here, and I thought, oh, I'll put pictures together so you can see everybody that's here. And I learned a great lesson in regard to this, that this is probably the hardest part I did in the entire project of putting the presentation together. People do not like getting their picture taken, and I can tell you, it was
Putting up on the screen.
right. And so we won't leave it up there too long because anyway, there's us, just the management side, but. You know, so I wanted to talk about, I thought, obviously the budget, we appreciate the work that the board does in supporting our budget. Our increase that we've seen over time is just when it's really due mainly to salaries and then some trial expense that we see typically. Our clearance rates, really, I would say that we are pretty much at the point of recovered from any COVID backlog. We feel pretty good about where we're at now. We're still working with the court administration and the judges to kind of clear what they see as a kind of final backlog, but really our numbers are pretty well. We're clearing easily about 88% of our cases about per year, and then anywhere from 6 to 10% are in warrant status, that are people that are out on warrant that we can't even get to. So when you look at that, you're anywhere between 94 to 98% of year-to-year cases that are getting cleared out. So we're doing pretty well. Obviously, Pam will talk a little bit here in the future of some of the trials, that kind of thing. But we're doing well. We have a full staff. Again, having 2 chief assistants has really helped. We have 10 assistant county attorneys. As the board will recall, we currently are using ARPA funds for 1 part-time position. I greatly appreciate that. She's doing a great job. She's terrific. Likely we'll be looking at in the budget, asking to make her position permanent. I mean, we are needing of that continual work and that continual person. We have 7 legal assistants and then 4 victim service staff. Our caseloads have stayed pretty steady, but fluctuate to some degree. Our last year, 2022, we had about right at around 2,031 cases, which was just a little bit down from some other years. But like a lot of people, we saw 2021 was a high mark for a lot of things that were going on. I think as we came off of COVID, we saw a lot more crime and some of those things, and that backlog that was going on is added into there. So I think that's some of the reasons we saw those numbers increase. Our paperless office initiative continues to work very well. We don't carry any paper files anymore. Everything we do in court is laptop computer. We track everything through our software program, which is MCAPS, the Minnesota County Attorney Prosecutors System. So that program works pretty well for us. It's web-based now, so it works pretty well, and it's continuing to grow, and we'll probably see a lot more storage things in regard to that up in the web in the future, but it's a good program that we use. And then finally, with the changes that we saw due to COVID, where we moved and purchased the government center and changed some areas around within the courthouse, our victim services actually moved out of our office area. They're now on first floor, and that opens up some office space within my office area for future growth, and that probably gives us a good 5 to 7 year expansion plan for what we'll see in the future as we keep adding staff. Crime-wise, as we'll see here in a bit when Pam talks, I think we're on a steady growth. It goes up and down, but generally speaking, we're just continuing to see increases due to increase in population, due to drug use within the community. That's definitely something that just we expect we'll continue to see. The grand jury system, we've used that a little bit more in the near past, just because the grand jury is typically used when we have the most serious crime, when we're looking at first-degree murder, premeditated murder, and we have to have an indictment. We're not allowed to charge that out. So in the past 2 years, we've had 2 specific first-degree murders that have occurred here within the county, and we've used that. I just had a trial over the last year and convicted one of those criminals. There was 2 that were involved in that same specific case, and one of them has already been tried. He got a life sentence in prison, and he will no longer be on the streets or around here in Clay County ever again. Our child in need of protection or services cases, those definitely continue to grow too. Families that impacted by drugs, impacted by other socioeconomic issues that are having difficulty being able to aid their children, and everything we look at that case, and when Katie talks, you'll see, I mean, everything we're about there is looking at the best interests of the children and making sure that those children are taken care of, and it may be that we just need to get more assistance into those families, but it may be that ultimately those parents aren't capable of taking care of those children, and we have to terminate the parental rights, and so that's something we work on. Mental health issues, as you all know, our detox facility that we're looking at, but mental health issues continue to grow. It's probably one of our main highest growing areas within the county. We just see a lot of mental health issues post-COVID due to chemical use, people that self-medicate because they can't quite figure out what they need to do and what's wrong. So that's a big issue. And then civil work. Myself, along with Katie and her team and Mike Leeser, I mean, we get to involve ourselves with a lot of really terrific projects. So like I mentioned, We've seen the Resource Recovery Center, the Red River Dispatch Center, our Future Chemical Dependency Treatment Center, the DMV project. There's a lot of different projects that's come through that we work with the different departments as those things are on the grow within the county. So that's exciting things that we get to see. So my team, the staff that really makes everything get done. And again, the ladies were not very happy about me taking their picture, but they're up there and I'm showing them. So they're a great team. They work hard every day. You can see they're all good, bright, cheery faces. So a lot of the things that you see, I mean, the work that goes on behind the scenes, we had, out of all the trials, you know, we work, sometimes they go to trial, sometimes they get continued behind other trials, and there's a lot of prep work that goes into them. We had to prep or reprep 737 trials, 1,700 subpoenas, 3,200 notices to law enforcement. We're constantly receiving disclosure as people are arrested, they get charged, they need to get that information so they can put up a defense. So 2,300 items sent to defense attorneys and different briefs and different things that are filed every day, thousands of things that we use. Everything, again, is electronic now, so we file with the court all of our briefs or any other legal arguments we have, but 7,000 plus of those. When the police are working, they're looking at doing administrative subpoenas, which are looking to get phone records, bank records, those kind of things. We're instrumental, and we're the only one that can actually administer those. So we had 121 of those last year in support of law enforcement. And then anybody that's out there that has warrants that are out there, if they've been arrested in another state or they're sitting in prison somewhere else, whether it's North Dakota, South Dakota, or any other state. Many times they can be down in Texas, wherever else. But once we know where they're at, we have to work with the governor's office, two governor's offices, both our Minnesota governor and then the governor of the state wherever they're at. And so as you might imagine, that's a lot of paperwork that goes on, a lot of work to get those governor's offices working together to get that person back here so we can work our process. So we had 43 of those last year. So that's just some of the stuff that the ladies are doing every day, and they are working hard, and we appreciate everything they do. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pam. You have to press the button. She's going to talk about the criminal division.
Good morning. Like Brian said, I'm Pam Foss. I've been here 22 years now in January, so this is my team. There's one missing. We didn't get a picture of Megan. She's on leave right now. She'll be coming back, I think, in a couple of weeks, but that's my team. They look a little happier about their photos, but they weren't a whole lot. As Brian mentioned, we have had, in the past year, we had 19 criminal jury trials. 15 of those actually went to verdict. Some of them were, actually we've had some, I think there was 3 of them that were mistrials because a juror or a defense attorney or a defendant came back with COVID, so we had to scrap the trial and start over. But of the ones that actually went to verdict, 11 of them rendered guilty verdicts for our office. It was a spread amongst all of the attorneys. I think everyone in the office at least had one trial last year, so that was good. With that comes appeals. So anytime we convict someone and send them to prison, they appeal that. So we've had in the past year 10 of those that were affirmed by the Court of Appeals. One was a Minnesota Supreme Court case that was affirmed, which means we won. They affirmed the decision. Right now we have 14 pending. In fact, we got 5 in the last 2 weeks that came in. Appeals are something that are handled by the attorney that handled the underlying district court case. So if I did the trial and there's an appeal, I do the appeal, which is a lengthy process of reviewing transcripts, writing briefs, arguing it to the Court of Appeals. So when some of our attorneys have left the office and their cases have come up, we've had a lot of the newer attorneys step up and agree to take those on, and they've done a great job with that. Talking about some convictions that we've had, and this isn't all of them, it's just kind of a sampling of what we've had and some of the sentences we've received. We had about 4 cases that were either child sexual abuse or child pornography cases. The total sentence for those 4 cases was 255 months. Minnesota does everything in months. We don't do it in years. We had 2 felony DUIs that equaled 99 months of prison time. Assaults were large. We had a huge amount of assaults with 608 months for those cases. As Brian talked about, we had a first-degree murder trial that he just finished up this year. That was a life imprisonment. We also had a second-degree murder that pled out. He got 150 months. That co-defendant is set for trial in May, so we will have that trial coming up. Brian also had in September of 21 a grand jury. He talked a little bit about that for the first-degree murder that he got the conviction on. I just had a first-degree murder grand jury at the beginning of February that he was indicted on, worked with the Moorhead Police Department. I can't say enough about that department and working with me. It was a quick track of when he was arrested in December. We did the grand jury before. Well, he challenged extradition, so he'd only been here a couple of weeks, and then we did the grand jury, so it was a matter of putting together a whole murder trial to present to the grand jury in a very short amount of time, which the Moorhead Police Department was excellent at helping me get that done. Specialty courts, as Brian mentioned, we have a drug court, we have a veterans court, we have a domestic violence court, and then we have a DUI court coming. Differences are between the drug and veterans and DUI courts are treatment courts. The domestic violence court is an accountability court, so there's a little bit of a difference. The drug court, we had 18 current participants in that court. Caitlin Herlock and Molly Dota are they represent our office at the drug court level. I can't see the number. How many do we have for?
Yeah, I think currently
What was
we're.
the graduation? 8.
Yeah, 8, but I will just mention, maybe Steve hasn't for his update today, there's a graduation, or I think it's 2 graduations coming up tomorrow, one veteran court graduation and one drug court graduation. And I think all of you at least once or at some point have attended those. I think it's a great event to see usually the arc that those individuals have come in when we see them addicted typically to methamphetamine, whatever else, really struggling to find their way and typically would be going to prison, but instead are able to turn their lives around, to have a job, to have at least 1 year or greater of sobriety, and making their way into the world. And so it's definitely a benefit. We think DWI court too will be much the same. We have some stats coming up here and you'll see, I mean, we alone, just on felonies can probably support the DWI court, but the city has their contract and they have a lot of the cases as well. But you'll see, I mean, we average probably all total, if you looked at one DWI a day within Clay County. And so there's plenty of DWI work that can be done in trying to get those people on the right path as well.
Then the other thing is the domestic violence court, which I said is a accountability. So it's a little bit different structure than the other courts. There is no funding for that court. We used to have grants for it. We don't have that anymore, which means we don't have a coordinator. So we've really struggled in domestic violence court since COVID at least. Myself and Brittany Davila are the main prosecutors in that court, but we are trying to get back on track. It's basically being run by our office, court administration, and the judges trying to come together to keep this court going. It is a very valuable court. When we did have a coordinator, we had studies done of how the court was doing, and the recidivism rate dropped considerably. The number of people that get through that court, that get the treatment and go through the treatment program, would never do that without this court, because I've been doing the domestics for the 22 years, and before we had this court, nobody finished those programs. I mean, and it was just an endless cycle. So we've really gotten better with the DV court. We're trying to get it back on track. We're trying to get back to the review hearings that we had, which are our post-sentence reviews, so we can make sure they can complete the programming and keep track of them, but it's getting better. But we're struggling in the DV court, I would say. Then Brian put together some slides, and these are the property crimes, and like he said, I mean, shows we're pretty consistent. I mean, the crime's not going down at all. Cases are going up, and all the property crimes. Personal crimes, we saw a large spike in assaults. in 2021. A lot of murders that occurred during COVID that we hadn't seen before, or attempted murders. So those numbers are consistently going up as well. And this is the DUI, like Brian said, we do have a substantial amount of first-degree DUIs. That's people that have had 4 and 10 years at least. So with that has gone up. So hopefully this DWI court will take care of some of those and get some of those numbers down. And then our drug crimes, which was mentioned on this previous slide about the convictions that we've had for that. It looks like it's going down. I think that's a little deceiving. I think it hasn't been going down. We've had large cases recently, a lot of first-degree sales, first-degree conspiracies. We're getting large sentences on those. We're getting a lot of fentanyl, a lot of methamphetamine off the street. But it's a never-ending battle right now that just keeps moving through the community. That's all I have for the criminal division.
I don't know if you have any questions for Pam, otherwise we'll just move to Katie here in the civil division, so.
Hi, I'm Katie Stock. I've been the civil chief now for the past year. I've been an attorney with the office for about 5 years, and I previously worked in the county attorney's office as a law clerk while I was in law school, and also as a legal assistant prior to law school. I supervise 4 attorneys who handle the civil cases for the county. We have a large variety of the types of cases we handle, and we're constantly navigating between different types of rules and procedures. Some of the things we handle are the juvenile delinquency cases, the children in need of protection or services. We do the guardianships, commitments, forfeitures, the planning and zoning, all of the county department advising, administrative appeals through DHS, and all of the child support for the county. And so probably the most voluminous area we work on is the juvenile crime and traffic. We utilize the restorative justice program for juveniles, so first-time offenders who commit less serious offenses have the opportunity to go through the restorative justice program, where they will meet with a team of people who talk about the behavior that occurred and what choices may have been made differently, and also what consequences are, and so that they can take accountability for their actions while also maintaining a clean criminal record, so that these cases go outside of the court system and they have the opportunity to keep their record clean while still taking responsibility for their actions. We opened 262 juvenile files last year, and we closed about 242, about half as many traffic files, and then we had about 82, and these are adult traffic court trials. The next most voluminous or time-consuming area is probably the child in need of protection or services. We opened 81 CHIPS files. I think this has gone down a little bit from the couple of years prior, and I think that's attributed to the hard work the social services team is doing to keep families with their parents. Of course, that's our goal, but it's always, what's best for the children that we keep in mind. And so there are times when children need to be removed from their parents in order to keep them safe. I would say probably the largest or the most common reason children are removed is due to drug use, such as primarily meth and fentanyl. We had 22 children adopted last year, with 9 children where custody was transferred to a relative or a non-custodial parent. We are excited to announce that we have been working with social services to kind of change the procedure we have related to adoptions for children who are under the guardianship of the commissioner through the state. And in previous years, adoptions or adoptive parents would hire private attorneys to help them complete the adoption process. So social services would work with these private attorneys to get them the appropriate paperwork they would need to be able to complete the adoptions. But we are working on a process that our office will be filing the adoption petitions for the adoptive parents. We are hopeful this will speed up the permanency process so that kids can be adopted sooner, which is best for them, but also it will benefit us and our office and the county because it will hopefully reduce costs such as for the foster care payments to foster parents. We will reduce the number of cases we have open and the amount of court time we spend, and also for the social workers to spend time meeting with these children one-on-one. So sometimes kids are located throughout the entire state and they're required to make monthly in-person meetings with them. So their mileage for their travel, the hours they spend on the road, their per diem for meals. So we're hoping to, by doing this, we will reduce costs in other places for the county. And it will also result in permanency faster for the children. I anticipate in these cases, at a minimum, we should get to permanency or finalize adoption at least 4 months sooner than we would by waiting for private attorneys, because the adoptive parents previously had to hire private attorneys to do this, and so sometimes just coming up with that money could take months and months, which would delay then how long it takes for these kids to get adopted. So,
I have a comment quick, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I think it's important also to note that the expedited process does not mean that you're abbreviating the portion of the process that vets out trying to keep the child within the family if it's in the best interest, and finding family members and relatives that really could take over the adoption if needed. So I think what you're talking about is great, because it does allow a child to find some sort of permanency and loving home faster, but it doesn't abbreviate the fact that you really do try
right.
with collaboration with social services in your department to keep that child within the home if that is in the best interest.
Absolutely, and of course, we're legally obligated to do that when the conditions are appropriate and the children are able to be safe in that situation. So,
I think it's mainly like just what you said, Commissioner Mojo. I mean, it's about expediting and making sure the court piece in the system is not bogging it down, but social services and the county attorney's office is doing everything to make sure that that child's interest and the family's interest is kept forefront. They're working very hard. They just don't want to. Some days in the past, in the old days, you'd see 6-8 months, a year plus where kids could be floundering around in the system, and now they've definitely streamlined some things to make sure that those kids are not sitting there long term or have been forgotten. So that's really when they talk about expedited process.
Yep.
You're exactly right.
any other questions about that? I'd like to move on to our probate caseload, which is a smaller caseload, or it has been in the past, but we've had some pretty big ones in the last year. This process for medical assistance can be paid to members people who reside in the county, and then after they pass away, we can recover those funds from a surviving spouse or from the surviving spouse's estate. And so in one particular case, we had a $322,000 medical assistance claim that the family refused to pay after their parents were deceased. And instead, they distributed all of their Edward Jones cash to the 3 surviving children. We asked them to reimburse the county as required by statute. They refused to do that. So Brian initiated a probate action and started the legal process to recover these funds. After that, I think the caseloads changed, and then the family still kind of refused to cut us a check, and so I filed a petition for allowance of claim. Essentially they said we don't want to have to pay this, but we ended up having a trial, and we won at trial, and at the end of all of it, after unfortunately we are a 4th level priority claim, so that means the family's attorney's fees get paid first, all of the estate bills and those things get paid first, and so by the time there was anything left for us, we resulted in $235,000 that we will be recovering just based on this case.
And I think really the main point of that is it's recovering $235,000 of taxpayers' money. That's the taxpayers paid for that, and that's a good thing. We want those people to be able to have that benefit, and we would never leave people out there not receiving medical assistance. But at a later point, if they have that money to to be able to pay that, they should, and we would work to recover that on behalf of the taxpayers, to refund that money to the state.
Why did they not pay it before if they had the money?
Go ahead.
Well, the claims are not due until the surviving spouse passes away.
So the idea being, Commissioner Gross, I mean, we would not ever want to, I mean, if a couple is there, and let's say a person needs serious medical assistance, we wouldn't want to force them to sell their home or their farm when that other spouse is living there. They have the right to be able to stay there, live there, but there still is an estate that should be able to ultimately pay for that instead of just the taxpayer paying that and then taking that and distributing it out to the family members after that other spouse passes away.
Thank you, yeah.
Some of the other areas we work on result in bringing in funds for the county. The forfeitures are a large portion of that. Last year, we opened 85 forfeiture files and forfeited about $80,000 in cash. This is cash that was used in the commission of a crime. We also can forfeit vehicles and guns and other items that are used in the commission of crime. We have about $185,000 in cash forfeitures pending, so we hope to wrap those up this year. The child support division also bills our time and has billed over $200 for the child support, like the expedited process, where we establish and enforce child support for Title IV-E funding and try to recover the medical assistance and child care benefits that are expended from the county. And then also welfare fraud billed about 50-plus hours, so for a total of about $20,000. Guardianship numbers have gone down slightly, I think. This is due to a change in policy. Previously, we would appoint relatives if they were able to care for guardians or for protected persons, but we have run into issues with that. And when the guardian becomes older, maybe they're having medical issues that prevents them from completing the appropriate paperwork. And so we have started just appointing Lutheran Social Services. That way we don't ever run into those issues where somebody is left without a guardian or their needs aren't being met. We did have quite a large trial last year. It was a 3-day trial with 4 attorneys on a guardianship case that had been going for 40 years, but very litigious in the past 2 years. There were issues with the guardian mother who was failing to meet the child or her daughter's, who was in her 40s, her daughter's basic needs. So we did win that case. LSS will continue to be that protected person's guardian, and so we did ensure that person's needs were being met. And then as Brian stated, commitments have gone up. Rule 20 cases have increased exponentially. There's a large number of mental health issues related to committing crimes, and we continue to see an increase in the mental health needs. Here are some charts on the juveniles. We have the diversions for chemical and other diversion offenses there, along with the delinquency numbers remaining pretty consistent. I mentioned the children in need of protection or services may have gone down slightly. I think, like I said, that's due to the great work social services is doing, but also remaining pretty consistent. And this chart shows our guardianship numbers going down slightly while the commitments going up quite a bit. And there's our traffic numbers.
I thought I would just highlight a little bit. I expect probably Michelle may want to come in front of you at some point from Victim Services, specifically at some point to maybe talk again restorative justice and some of the good work she's done. As you recall, ARPA funding has funded a 2-year position for Alex Menke. He's currently in the schools. He's in, I think, pretty much every school, Moorhead and all the rural schools between Barnesville, Holly, Euland, I think pretty much all of them that are out there, Dilworth, Glen, Felton. And so he's doing a lot of good work, and I think that at some point they'd like to come back and talk to you. But again, they do a lot more work than just the the restorative justice side of things. They work with victims, witnesses every day. A lot of affidavits of loss, people that have lost money or when there's damage to property, those kind of things. They're helping work in filing those, so you can see those numbers that they filed over the last year. They're involved, I mean, beyond just making sure that those victims are helping to understand the process and how long it might take and helping them navigate the court systems. They also work several different committees that they're on, the Elder Abuse Committee, Domestic Violence Court Committee, Human Trafficking Committee, the Clay County Juvenile Law Committee. They work with the Clay County Collaborative and the Safe Roads Coalition as well. Their referrals under restorative justice over the last 2 years, you can see where they've referred for diversion. As Katie mentioned, a lot of times when it's chemical dependency issues or if there's crime and we're looking at diversion, whether it's through the restorative justice or some other thing, but you can kind of see, I think our numbers really for 2002 reflect the fact that Alex is now in the schools and really starting to see that pickup of the program working better. You can see the 167 referrals, 56 out of those different rural schools, as I mentioned, 91 from Moorhead and 20 from other places such as law enforcement or wherever else. And you can see the success rate. Again, I think if you focused on the 2022, if they're successfully completing restorative justice, 90% are at no new offense, with 10% creating a new offense. So, I mean, a low recidivism rate. And even the ones that aren't successful in completing that, still 60% no new offense, but 40% new offense. So you can see the numbers of victims served. 2020, we think that the numbers, because of our new system, there's a different reporting methods through our MCAPs, and so I think our numbers probably are closer to that 1,000 as we were in 2021, but, and you can see the contacts with victims. They continue to increase along with the caseloads that you saw, so you know there's just a lot of work being done to make sure the victims are served, that their voices are heard, and that's really one of the most important things that we do and that law enforcement does, is making sure that those victims are made whole, that they get a chance to make sure they're participating in the system, and ultimately can come out of that hopefully at least satisfied. They may not be whole. I mean, sometimes you can't be made whole based on the crime that's been committed against you, but we're trying to do the best we can to give them access and understand the system. So, and that's the contact numbers there. So I just want to thank everybody on the board for your support and all the work that you guys do over the year and the things that we do to help make sure that the county's working smoothly. And if there are any questions, we're free to answer them for you. Sorry, we went a little bit over.
Go ahead.
Yeah, first, I just want to point out, having, since I got here, a chance to work with you guys. Pam, you made me a believer with Thad Stafford's cases back in '06. I was involved in child sexual cases, investigations, and domestic violence cases. It was a big part of my career as a detective, and I have not seen it done that well in big city departments. And you, and I think I expressed at the time, I'm a believer, and that was that case. It was a very compelling one, and you did a tremendous job on that. And these are things we need to focus on. Just to my fellow commissioners, Brian and I have had a couple discussions about staffing and who's paying what back when you guys were handling the city cases. And I don't think we approached that properly back then. And I think it proved in the long run that you've got to pay for what you've got, what the caseloads require. And we are in a community of 250,000 people. We are a metro area, and you need to have the staff that can handle the caseloads as they come through. And the only thing I heard this morning that really gives me pause, our specialty courts are important. The domestic violence court is critical, and it's a different animal, as Pam pointed out, than courts in which you're trying to get treatment for the people. This is something that we started in the 80s, trying to hold people accountable. There's a huge, still to this day, societal willingness to support domestic violence. to cover it up, to try and explain it away. And our system needs to be one that holds violators of domestic violence accountable. And that court is an essential tool to that end. And I would love, if there are needs in that area, to hear what they are, because it's something we should never back off of. And then just on the newly approached DWI court that we've got going, Commissioner Mojo and I have been going to those meetings, and I think by nature of the fact that first offense DWIs and misdemeanor DWIs are not going to face jail time, it's going to be really difficult to put the teeth in the law that we need, or the consequences that we need early on in DWI cases. But the ones that are going to work, where that court's going to be able to provide the incentives for people to change what they're doing and get the treatment they need, are going to be the ones that the county's prosecuting right now, and that's the gross misdemeanor and felony DWIs, where people have a real incentive to stay out of prison or stay out of jail, and that gives them consequences where maybe they're willing to make the changes. But I'd love to see us get that court underway. But again, just overall, having 16 years of experience working with your office, you got good people and they do the job well. And as Pam indicated, Moorhead Police Department and Clay County Sheriff's Department do things as well as I've had the opportunity to work with in law enforcement. And you guys provide the legal services for those departments that reflects the quality of the law enforcement and the protection that people are getting in this county. So I'm grateful. Thanks.
Pam, Katie, and Brian, thank you for the excellent report. I mean, as I said before, you guys have really been giving good reports this year, and this is really excellent. I mean, when you look sometimes when we hear we got over 600 employees here in Clay County, but when we hear what you guys do, it is excellent work, and thank you so much for your report. Okay, we'll move on to the Sheriff's Department, the request to purchase 2 snowmobiles.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thanks for having us this morning. We are here today to request approval for purchasing new snowmobiles and to replace our current snowmobiles. Our current snowmobiles are 2014 Yamaha trail sleds, and they are just that. They're very good on the trail, but if you need to take them out on some remote use areas, they get to be a little dicey to operate at times, and we have seen that over the years with one of them being rolled over by a deputy driving it in not a trail area, and another deputy actually ended up getting injured one day when he put his leg down to try and prevent it from rolling over on him, and he was out for a little bit. So we'd like to move forward with the replacement. Gabe's going to go into what we have available in internal service and a couple snowmobile options moving forward.
Thank you. So in internal service, we did, when we purchased those back in 2014, they were internal service. So we have $15,132 as of January available per snowmobile. And then obviously we would, the 2 snowmobiles would either be sold at auction or traded in if allowed. So we would have the dollars from that. So with snowmobiles, much like vehicles now, you basically pre-order them, they build them, they would be ready for pickup this fall or early winter. So the 2 companies I did solicit bids from based off of kind of what we decided were the features we wanted would be Polaris and Skidoo. There's no guarantees, just because of demand with snowmobiles right now, there's no guarantees that we will get. Polaris may not have the parts or whatever available to manufacture the one we want, so we would possibly have to look at Skidoo. So I did build 2 different, models or manufacturers. And the pricing on both of them with very similar features was pretty comparable. The Polaris one we would be looking at ordering would be $15,158, and the comparable Skidoo would be $15,653. With the pre-order, the manufacturers do look for a deposit at time of order, so that would be, granted, we get approval sometime here in the next month or so, and then paying the remainder of the balance at time of purchase. Is there any questions on, I guess, what we're looking at, or the difference between maybe the older ones and these, or?
I guess my first question would be, what type of use do you get out of them? I mean, do you use them often in the wintertime?
Yeah. Do you want to answer? I can answer that. So a couple different things. We do receive a grant from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to the groomed snowmobile trails in Clay County are called grant and aid trails. So snowmobile clubs get monies to groom those trails, and we get dollars from the Department of Natural Resources to do snowmobile enforcement on those trails. So we do have shifts available for deputies to work where they patrol on snowmobile, and that their time and any fuel and repairs on the snowmobiles is recoverable from that Department of Natural Resources grant. So usually it's on the weekends during the winter. We'll make those shifts available for deputies, and if the weather is conducive to go out, we'll send 2 deputies out to do that. The other kind of big area, more of a public outreach, is for youth snowmobile safety courses. Youth are required to, if they're under a certain age, actually have a practical where they ride the snowmobiles as part of their certification. So we make our snowmobiles available for that. So I know like Harvey Moose from Moorhead, he does a youth snowmobile safety course. Mark, or the sheriff, brought the snowmobiles over there for that. We did one in Hitterdal here this winter. So that's kind of the other main community outreach portion for it. And then there's also the kind of the third for emergency rescues. We do have the enclosed UTV vehicle now that works really good for that, but there's just certain places where a snowmobile can get to that a UTV, even a tracked machine, can't get to. So we do use it for that. It's rare we've used it for emergency rescues, but we do have a sled. It's called a rescue sled that we can pull behind the snowmobiles.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Is there going to be a fit-up cost like the vehicles? I mean, I think you're probably using portable radios.
We'd use portable radios on there. It'd be a very minimal fit-up cost. We already have the lights for it, and be minimal cost for the switch. So we would go down to Code 4 and have them install a light and just a switch to turn it on. I would venture to guess that cost per sled would be less than $500.
Okay.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the model? I know you said you're not going trail sled, and Skidoo is your language, Polaris is mine. So are you talking are you going the switchback or the
so
RMK?
like the Skidoo, for instance, would be it's a 650 engine. What we currently have is a 4-stroke motor, which they're pretty dependable, but they only have an electric start, and we don't use our sleds all the time, and as they get older, sometimes we have issues with them not starting. So this would be a 2-stroke motor, and it does allow for a pull start backup. It still has an electric start, but if we're out somewhere, I know Mark or the sheriff had an issue where we brought him to Hitterdal, and we had put a new battery in one less than 6 months prior, and it wouldn't start. Well, there's no pull start. So this here, at least you have a backup. So it works a little better. The ones we have now, I would call them more of they're definitely like a 2-person trail sled, so they're very big, bulky, don't handle probably as good. This would be kind of, I would call it maybe more of a crossover snowmobile. It's got a little bit longer track. It does have the capability to put a passenger on the back if need be, but just being a little bit of a newer model, and then the design is, I would say, handles a lot more agilely than the old ones we have.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Gabe, you talked about these 2 different manufacturers, and their prices, they're fairly similar. And I got, based on what you mentioned, there might be a concern over deliverability. So are you asking, it seems to me that we should allow you to work with either one of these with the idea in mind that it can be delivered in the timely manner that you need to have. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, that would be a fair ask.
Mr. Chair, I would so move that we authorize the Sheriff's Department to move forward with the replacement of the 2 snowmobiles.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just on the ones that we're disposing of, are you putting that on the auction, or how are we selling the other ones?
So I can kind of answer that. One of the dealers that I've contacted that handles a certain model, they would be interested in taking them as trade-in.
Oh, great.
I think we would do better on trade-in, but the other one may not.
Okay.
So
All right, good.
And then those funds that we'd get back from that trade-in, of
Apply
course,
it.
would be back in an internal service.
Thanks.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You should have a naming contest, Sheriff, for these snowmobiles with our county schools. I think the kids would think that was fun.
Gonna name one Steve.
Breaking down all the time?
Okay, still trying to stay on time here.
Yeah, right.
Request approval of the Department of the Motor Vehicle, the pre-design architectural services. So, Steve, you taking that one?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This morning, for your consideration, as you are certainly aware, we've been having some ongoing discussions about, with the redevelopment of the Morton Center Mall area, what we're going to do with our DMV. As a board, you've had some discussions about exploring potential options. We've been having ongoing discussions within our building committee over the last number of months on moving forward and on what is the best path forward. Having some discussions here at the board level, one of the things the building committee brought forward here today would be to enter into a pre-design agreement for architectural services with Klein McCarthy to develop what the best route, have all the information, whether that is building an existing building or whether that's moving. We need to have the information to make that decision from the board's perspective. And so before you this morning, you have a proposal from Klein McCarthy for our pre-design study. That would be a lump sum of $22,500 with reimbursement expenses of up to additional $1,250. Again, that would be six separate meetings where they would look at our current facilities, evaluate our needs, not just for now, but for the next few decades, to make sure that we have the appropriate space and needs for the citizens within Clay County. With that, there's also an AIA contract. This contract is similar to what you've seen in other pre-design projects. Mr. Melton and his staff have reviewed this lease and have deemed it to be appropriate for your consideration. And with that, I'd yield for any questions.
Is the state driver's license involved in this at all?
That will be part of the discussion, Mr. Chair. As we've talked about, they've moved into a location off Highway 10 and have a multi-year lease, but we certainly would be engaging with them to determine if they would want to come back, because that would be important to know as we would look at the size of that project.
You say they have moved into a place in Highway 10?
Yes, the state has moved into the old Ness, or, yeah,
Oh,
the old Ness
there,
Auto,
okay.
right next to where the old Big Lot was.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have had several conversations about this in the building committee. And, although, the current DMV site is really, really working well and it's sized very appropriately for today's work, we do know that we're under kind of a time issue where we do have to find an alternative site. And I think this whole idea of this is to help us get some sort of a schematic design. How big are we going to need? And then, whether with that information we can look at what current facilities might be available versus building, but ultimately we still need to get some detailed information to help make that plan. So the building committee recommends that we move forward with this process.
Is that like a motion or?
Well, that's, sure, that can be a motion.
Very good.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we've got a motion by Commissioner Campbell, a second by Commissioner Mojo. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would just note that through the contract I failed to mention, this does provide the opportunity for that $22,500 for 2 sites. One site's identified up in 15th Avenue North. The second would be to be determined. And the intent of that is to get the best price based on the needs of that potential area as far as fiber, internet, all that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up, but it would not prevent us from being able to use that information in the event that some existing facility became available. The study would still help us to determine if that would be an appropriate option.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. With that, we've got a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. We'll move ahead with that project.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we didn't mean to jump in on Steve. Here you go, Steve. Just keep moving along.
Obviously, you're next, huh?
Got to follow the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This morning, for your consideration, I think last week I just provided just a real brief update during my committee assignment discussion about the potential for funding through congressional directed spending application. If you recall back at our intergovernmental retreat, we had a discussion with Tina Smith's communications director, and kind of after hearing about some of our building projects, and with the substance use facility being one of them, felt that this would be a good discussion, a good opportunity for the county to submit for a grant. We had some discussions on an internally with Mr. Jeepers, Daffy Duck here. I am falling apart, Commissioner Campbell. With Troy and Kathy and Mr. Melton, and also Rhonda and Kirsten Lepard about the best needs of our department's mental health, substance use, and it was determined that based on the short turnaround that this window would provided, that we didn't have enough information on, say, mental health component, but we did have the necessary information on the detox withdrawal management. Having said that, that doesn't mean that Kathy, Troy, and their staff haven't been burning the midnight oil to meet the potential deadline of March 10th, should this board make the decision today to move forward with allowing them to apply for the grant. And Kathy, Troy, I don't know if you have any comments.
They didn't, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, they did not have a limit as to what we could request. So we did put the request in for $10 million. We have the $5 million grant for the project. We thought we would just, as long as we're submitting this, they'll award whatever they choose to, obviously, or not award at all. But we put the $10 million in to complete the projected cost of the $15 million.
Very good. Okay.
And then also, I was speaking with Mr. Chair, or I sent an email, they needed a contact, so when we get awarded, the senator can contact the chair. And so, that's what we hope, is you're going to get a call to
Be glad to get that call.
tell you that we were awarded the funding.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. I also think it's important to note that Senator Klobuchar's staff has also encouraged us to apply for this. I think that, one, we're really, really proud about the need that there is in not proud of the need, but proud of the ability for us to start addressing the need with this build. And there's another component to the potential project is a mental health wing, and you heard from the attorney's office earlier that those cases are certainly on a huge rise for us. And I think part of the commitment to this board is that we've allocated funds to build the project, and the potential awarding of upwards of the request made could help us make a pretty large step to addressing the mental health wing of that as well. And so I think that, well, I hope that that component is added in your application as well, is that there is a future desire to address that with an expansion as well.
Commissioner Mojo and Commissioners and Mr. Chair, there is qualifying, there's some qualifying parameters there, and we could meet the parameter under the Labor, Health, Human Services, and Education Subcommittee, and that was for really substance use. So that was the parameter that we could meet under that. It didn't speak specifically to mental health. We can certainly add it in our narrative. If there's space, they limit it to so many words, so we could certainly add that. And I believe we added some information in regards to our clients with mental health issues, Troy. So we have that piece in there as well. But there was some specific qualifiers that we had to meet. So we had to meet those. Also to note, when you mentioned the senators, there was places where we needed to check the senators. So Senator Klobuchar was on there, Senator Smith, and then Representative Fischbach. So those were checked. We had to check who this was being sent to.
I'd like to get a copy of that request also, if I can, just
Sure.
help me get, in case I do get any calls on it,
The whole proposal, do you want a copy of?
the high points.
Yeah, well,
The abbreviated version.
we hope to finish the proposal completed, so we can just review it on Thursday. It's due on Friday, so I'll get you the highlights.
Mr. Chair, if I can, I want to follow up on Commissioner Mojo's comments. And, right now, the substance use facility that we're working on and planning for, we have a financial plan for that. Certainly, these funds would be nice to see come in, but I guess what my concern would be is the current narrative that in our request, I think we need to make sure that we incorporate something on the mental health piece. Certainly that would not reject us, but if we don't have it in there, it could exclude us from being able to use it for that purpose. Because we've got the substance use thing going right now, and all along we've been talking, even on our site, we even have a separate section reserved for advancing some mental health opportunities there. So if at all possible, I think that narrative should include something to that effect, so that those funds could qualify.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Campbell, I think as Kathy mentioned, they certainly can do that. I think one of the other pieces that we talked about in our committee meeting was in the event that there were dollars that we had allocated for the substance use facility that we no longer needed because of the grant, we could also then utilize that as that seed money for the mental health piece.
Well, I know these grant applications take a lot of time and energy and writing abilities, so thanks for your work to submit that, and we will be hopeful for a positive result.
Mr. Chair, I would move the submittal of the application.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to submit the application. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Kevin, you have to get going, or you
I can hang around a few more minutes yet.
want to give your report first?
I can be here till 11, so
Oh, okay.
hopefully we can.
We'll take the last item then on the request for the township maintenance contract. Justin?
Yeah, good morning. So today I'm here for the approval of the 2023-2024 Township Maintenance Contract Rate. So last week, we met with Highway Committee and held a township officers meeting at the Highway Department. So the proposed rate for the contract Now, the contract will run from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024. So the proposed rate is $973. And this is per mile, and it is an increase of $121 from last year. So the way that this number is calculated is we do take actual costs from 2022, and then that number is plugged into a 5-year rolling average. So if we did not use the rolling average, the actual cost for 2022 would be $12.65 per mile. And I guess part of the reason for the increase was fuel costs were significantly higher in 2022. And as compared to 2021, we spent 1,973 more hours of snow removal.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Our Highway Tracking Committee did review this, and then we did on Thursday, we did meet with the township officers and presented this to them, and because they need to have it for their annual meeting, which is tonight, I believe.
Next Tuesday.
What's next Tuesday? Okay.
Yep.
So, with that, and there was certainly no objection by any of the township officers that were there. They understood the formula. I think they're very appreciative of the 5-year
Yeah.
rolling number.
I did want to thank Ann. She puts a lot of time and
Yes.
effort into this.
Yeah. But with that, Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the maintenance per mile designated amount for 2020, or it goes to July, or?
It's July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024.
Yeah, there we go.
We'll second the motion.
Okay, we've got a motion by Kevin, second by Jenny, to approve the increase. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll go into committee reports. Kevin, you want to start out?
Sure, I can do that. February 28th, we did have a Highway Tracking Committee meeting, and we did go over several things in terms of regular construction versus 2020, or allotments from CASA, and the number that we're looking at for 2023 is $4,132,000, and that is down a little bit from 2022, which was $4,278,000. And the Township Bridge Fund is also down. Town Road Fund is down. These are funds that come from the state. County maintenance is down, and county municipal maintenance is down. All of them are down for 2023 over 2022, funds coming in. And then we talked about the proposed contract rate with the townships. And then we also that day had the Prairie Lake Solid Waste meeting was actually on March 1st. And that was just a very typical non-eventful. Of course, we ended up having that one be virtual because there was one of our days where we had this winter storm. We spent significant time talking about legislation that's currently going on in St. Paul, which we've talked about here on several occasions. We also had the Clay County Joint Powers Authority meeting on February 28th. And we had one item on there, and that was Minnesota legislative update and plan, and the MCC GAPA did move forward with a bonding request for the diversion projects for the full amount, both the $24 million in requests from the city as well as the $36.2 million for the county. And that is being processed and working. They are working with Representative Joy on that now. Then on March 2nd, we did have the Clay County Intergovernmental Committee meeting. We spent some time recapping the retreat for 2020 that we had this year, and we'll start the process now in planning for 2024. Each entity did give some reports. We heard from Moorhead Schools, DGF Schools, City of Dilworth, City of Moorhead, the townships in Clay County. Then we did have the highway tracking, another highway tracking meeting that was designed solely for the meeting with the townships, as was mentioned. That was Thursday,
Last Thursday afternoon.
whatever that date is for last Thursday. And then yesterday morning, we did have a meeting that was related to solid waste, and in some ways it has a little bit of highway tracking, but it's primarily a solid waste issue. So it was Commissioner Mojo and I met with MnDOT, and that is regarding looking for sources available to look at 25 to 30,000 cubic yards of contaminated soil that could come out of the 11th Street underpass project. So we continue to work with Clay County continues to work with MnDOT, and I know they have some stipulations that require some of it to go to the landfill, and of course our landfill permit restricts us to a certain number of yards or tons, however you want to call it, within our permit. So they're going to be reviewing our permit. MnDOT's going to be reviewing our permit with us. Obviously, if we can find a place locally, we're able to cut that distance of trucking down from 20 miles to otherwise what could be 190 miles in transportation costs, which is very significant. We're talking about 7-figure savings, if we can find something more locally. But we still have to be within our permit requirements. So, and that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Dave?
Thanks. I was on winter vacation last week, was lucky enough to get out of the town during the blizzards. And, but I do have my previous week report. On the 22nd of February, along with the commissioners, attended the AMC Legislative Conference remotely. It had been, as I'm sure was brought up last week, it had been moved to Zoom with the weather basically shutting down the opportunity for a statewide conference to take place in the cities. We had a review of the general priorities that we have with this legislative session, and we discussed it with Representative Joy, and I'm losing, we've got 2 townships represented by other legislators right now, and I do not have them in my notes, but they joined us in a conversation about the priorities for Clay County, and that would have been covered last week by...
Representative Keel and Senator Johnson.
Right. Senator Johnson and Representative Keel. And we were able to provide those along with Representative Joy, provide them with the information on where our priorities are for Clay County. Later that day, the next day, I attended remotely the Public Safety Policy Committee meeting. We had a very extensive discussion and presentation on rural EMS and some of the issues that are being faced by those agencies in the state of Minnesota. There is some legislation out there to try and help align some of the billing and get some funding for them. But right now, a lot of them are trying to operate on fees for service. There are not the seatbelt fines were something that went to these agencies in the past. Well, now everybody's wearing a seatbelt, and that's good, but you can no longer count that as a way of fundraising. And as one of them put it, we can only have so many spaghetti meatball feeds and barbecues and raffles. He says there's got to be a consistent source of revenue from the state. And we looked at some of the opportunities they have on that. Carly Stark with the AMC staff then gave us a legislative update. House File 1838 which is working on community supervision funding formula, is being worked on right now. As of the time of that meeting, it was going well, but it was still needing to be reviewed and finalized. And we discussed a number of other bills that are out there, including armor funding for the radio system. Later that afternoon, I remotely attended the AMC Board of Directors meeting. We discussed some of the possibilities of change of legislative meetings to virtual, which was very appropriate given the fact that none of us get to the cities that week and they had shut the legislature down. And that was my first Board of Directors meeting, and it was informative. It was good to see how that operates. And then later that day, I attended the diversion board meeting in person, and I'm sure Commissioner Campbell covered that last week in his report. So that'll conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Last week, I also attended the MCC JPA meeting where we talked about legislative priorities. Yesterday, I attended the MCC JPA, or not, the MRC meeting with you, Commissioner Gross. We talked about the legislative priorities and talked about the conversations and bills that are currently happening at the Capitol, reiterated our policy platforms in terms of county program aid. We had a presentation from Julie Ring from AMC on that. Talked about AMC's continued support of long-term sustainable transportation funding. Talked about the user tax distribution fund. Talked about the SCORE funding that continues to be a priority for us as well. And talked about a long time about the drainage authority and talked about the drainage portal that's in discussion. Certainly, there's lots of concerns about that. There was continued discussion at the end of the meeting about MRC's platform priorities and what's appropriate for platform priorities and what's not. Again, the Capitol Hill advising just does a really great job of keeping MRC aware of the issues at hand at the Capitol. They're doing a really good job. So glad that we're contracting with them. Yesterday, I also attended the Clay County Contaminated Materials discussion that was talked about by Commissioner Campbell, and I attended the MetroCog Executive Committee meeting. We're in the process of executive director interviews. Talked about that process for the second round of interviews happening this week. That concludes my report.
Okay, last week I attended the Highway Tracking Committee meeting, which has already been discussed. I was just going to add that the increase in funding for this year's contract with the townships, a lot of it had to do also with the fuel. The motor graders' fuel costs was up 92%, and also fuel for the truck drivers was up 122% from last year. So that's what really, assisted in the cost of that going up to $1,200 a year, per mile, excuse me. Other than that, I also attended the MRC meeting yesterday morning. One thing, there was a lot of discussion of the drainage registry portal, and I don't know if our county's involved too much on that. I think the watersheds must have that under control, but I haven't had much concern or anybody calling me on that or not, but some of the counties sure seem to be concerned about that bill going through or working on that bill. Also, Minnesota, they found out their dead last in county funding system for the probation system. So we need to try to get increased funding for that. Trapping beaver, they're trying to making it more difficult for trapping beavers in the area. So they're trying to get that bill down, that they don't implement that system. And also, they're very concerned about the DNR and all the land that they're buying. They feel that their DNR is buying more land than they can maintain, so Those are the highlights of that, other than what Jenny presented. With that, Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last Tuesday, I participated in the MCC JPA Diversion Authority funding request for the legislature that's been addressed. That afternoon, I also participated in highway tracking, which has been addressed by Commissioner Campbell, Commissioner Gross. On that afternoon, I met with Sheriff Empting and the two chief deputies in regards to some budget ideas for their department in 2024. On the March 1st, I met with Representative Joy and Executive Director Joel Paulson of the diversion in regards to the funding request. I'd like to thank Representative Joy for his time and certainly on a short turnaround on the request. And that information is being generated for potential a jacket for legislation and will be turned over to his staff this week. That afternoon, we were invited by Interstate Engineers and Terracon to sit in along with Justin and Matt Jacobson with Senator Kupek's office in regard to bonding dollars, Senate File 1188, and then also House File 892 for the reconstruction of the Spring Prairie Township Road, 70th Avenue North. So we had a good dialogue there. Participated in the intergovernmental meeting that's been addressed by Commissioner Campbell. And the second also had two department head updates. And that evening or afternoon participated in the maintenance contract that was before the board this morning. Monday participated in the contaminated soil discussion. We'll continue to have subcommittee meetings on that moving forward. Just a couple other quick updates. Looks like you've all now responded. We're looking to schedule our next county rural cities meeting on March 30th, 4 to 6 p.m. The city of Barnesville has offered to host this spring, and so we'll be getting those invitations out to the remainder cities coming up here this week. As Brian mentioned earlier, we have a drug court graduation tomorrow, and also a veteran service, Veterans Court at 12:15, drug court 1:30 in courtroom 3. And then I did provide you guys a handout. I know that this board has heard two separate presentations over the last couple of years about the potential West Central Regional Water District project. We had most recently had an update in last November with representatives from AE2S and Keith Burnt, the highway engineer in Norman County. This board had some additional questions. There was concerns whether or not information was being shared with our citizens in that area. The email that you provided here just shared some updates. Again, currently Polk County and Norman County have both passed a resolution in support of this water district now. They also have 10 partner cities that have signed the resolution, including both Flint, Felton, and Georgetown. And so there was concern, again, whether or not this information was getting out. They wanted to share that they do now have a website. That website, the link is listed on that email, but for the citizens, it's https //WCRWD AE2S.hub.arcgis.com /. And that provides information about the project. And so that will be helpful. There's also a link on there where you can take a survey. The citizens can take a survey on that matter. And lastly, they are meeting today, representatives from AE2S and the cities into the Minnesota Senate Capital Investment Committee. They have two bills that are out there, Senate File 1331, that's co-authored by Kupek and Senator Johnson, and also a companion bill in the House with Representative Keel and Representative Joy, and that's House File 832. And so you can see in this letter, the hope is that the board would consider, the last time they talked about coming forward with us to sign that resolution. They have said that they would be willing to come back later this month or early April if it would be the board's wishes to hear more about the project. And so I'll leave that to you for your discussion. I did include some of the Senate File 1331, just one of the documents, one of the pages from that document. Again, the initial ask is for the issuance of bonds of $8.3 million. When it comes to the project, there would be an additional up to $64 million for that project. I did just receive some additional handout that they're going to be providing the Senate committee today that I'll share that with at a later time. And with that, I think that concludes my report. Oh, I do have one other thing, just a point of note. Today, Governor Walz is going to be signing a bill that's going to expand access to licensed drivers regardless of immigration status. And in speaking with our DMV, they have not been provided the information of the operations of what that's going to look like yet. And so while that's going to go into law later today, I would ask that maybe our citizens just provide a day or two to ensure that the operation status from the state is passed out to all the DMVs. And that concludes our report.
I guess concerning that regional water district project, I guess I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more on that, what our involvement as the county would be, because like I got a call from the mayor of Felton yesterday, and they're concerned about it too, so I think we need to get involved and, find out what's going on so to help the cities out. So if we can schedule something with Stephen Stick, I guess, is the coordinator for AE2S.
I agree, and I think what last time was presented, I think we just said because of lack of information, we just didn't take the position either way, but I think it would be appropriate to have him back, and maybe this thing is gaining some legs now. That's
Well, a couple of years ago, I was in Felton for a meeting where they showed their water, and I know I wouldn't have washed in it.
Yeah, they're not alone, so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I will line that up for later this month or early April.
Okay. Brian, you have anything further? Again, thank you for your presentation, and Jackie, you got something for us? Okay, we're adjourned.